Ma'am, stand up. You need to leave.
Why?
You're not staying here.
I paid for my meal.
ID, now.
Am I being detained?
If you don't comply, you will be.
I'm reaching for my wallet.
Last warning.
Special Agent Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation.
What you just heard was a police officer ordering a black woman out of a restaurant. Without stating a single lawful reason, he escalated the encounter, threatened detention, and treated her presence as a problem until she revealed she was a special agent with the FBI. In that moment, the power dynamic flipped, and the officer realized he had made a catastrophic mistake. What followed wasn't just embarrassment. It led to exposure, a civil rights lawsuit, internal investigations, and career-ending consequences that would ripple far beyond that restaurant. This wasn't just about one confrontation. It became a test of accountability, and it came with a multi-million-dollar price tag. Her name is Special Agent Danielle Carter, 42 years old. At the time of the incident, she had served 17 years in federal law enforcement, the last 12 as a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She specialized in financial crimes and public corruption investigations, working on multi-agency task forces across Texas and Louisiana. Throughout her career, Agent Carter had participated in more than 60 federal investigations, contributed to indictments in organized fraud cases totaling over $45 million in recovered assets, and received formal commendations for interagency coordination and case leadership. Within the Bureau, she was known for precision, restraint, and professionalism, someone trusted with sensitive operations, and sworn to uphold constitutional law. That night, she wasn't conducting an operation. She wasn't undercover. She wasn't on duty. She was simply a federal agent and a citizen exercising the same rights she had spent nearly 2 decades protecting. The officer who approached her that night was Officer Matthew R. Collins, 38 years old, a patrol officer with the Oak Ridge Police Department in Texas. He had been on the force for 11 years, spending most of that time in routine patrol and disturbance response. But his personnel record told a different story. In the 5 years leading up to the restaurant incident, Collins had accumulated 9 citizen complaints, 6 alleged discourtesy or unprofessional conduct. 3 involved claims of racial bias during stops. None resulted in suspension. All were classified as not sustained after internal review. To separate use of force reports had been filed against him, both cleared by supervisors. One involved a traffic stop. That escalated unnecessarily. The other was tied to a disorderly conduct arrest later dismissed in municipal court. Internal affairs records showed that Collins had received verbal counseling on 3 occasions, but no formal disciplinary action. His performance evaluations consistently rated him as meets expectations. Despite the pattern of complaints, no retraining requirement was imposed, no probation, no suspension. The department maintained that there was insufficient evidence of misconduct in prior cases. That protection ended the night he confronted a federal agent in a room full of witnesses, and on camera, Officer Matthew Collins entered the restaurant through the main glass doors on West Briarwood Avenue. Just after dinner service had peaked, the establishment was moderately busy. Families were seated along the left wall. A group of 3 men occupied a booth near the window. Special Agent Danielle Carter sat alone at a 2-person table near the center aisle, her plate in front of her, receipt folded beside a glass of water. Collins paused just inside the entrance. A hostess gestured subtly in Carter's direction. He walked directly toward her table without speaking to anyone else. "Ma single quotes am. Stand up. You need to leave," he said. Carter looked up from her plate. "Why?" Several nearby diners turned in their seats. No one else in the room was being addressed. No disturbance had occurred. No raised voice. No complaint audible to patrons. "You're not staying here," Collins replied. Carter remained seated. "I paid for my meal." "Is there a problem?" Collins stepped closer. His boots stopped within inches of her chair. His posture was squared. His voice grew sharper. "ID." Now, there had been no explanation of a crime, no mention of a violation. The only action taken was directed at a black woman sitting alone in a predominantly white dining room. "Am I being detained?" Carter asked. "If you don't comply, you will be," Collins responded. Heads turned fully now. A man at a nearby table lifted his phone. A woman across the aisle whispered, "She's just eating." Carter's hands moved slowly upward, palms partially visible. "I'm reaching for my wallet." "Do it slow," Collins said. There was no equivalent scrutiny of anyone else present, no demand for identification from surrounding diners. The focus remained singular. Carter opened her purse carefully and removed her wallet. She handed him her driver's license. Collins glanced at it briefly. He did not read it aloud. He did not return it immediately. "This isn't enough," he said. "Enough for what?" Carter asked. "You're being asked to leave." On what basis was still unanswered. A man near the window said quietly, "Why her?" Collins ignored him. "Last warning," the officer said. Carter did not raise her voice. "What law am I breaking?" There was no response citing a statute, no reference to trespassing being formally requested by management in her presence, no articulation of probable cause, only insistence. Collins' hand hovered near his duty belt. The gesture was visible and deliberate. The signal was clear. Escalation was imminent. A diner spoke up louder this time. "She hasn't done anything." Collins turned his head briefly toward the voice. "Stay out of it." The tension in the room was no longer subtle. It was direct, visible, targeted. Carter stood slowly from her chair. She did not step toward the officer. She did not attempt to leave abruptly. She maintained space. She opened her wallet again. "Special Agent Danielle Carter," she said, flipping the leather case outward so the gold shield and credentials faced him. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The badge was inches from the officer's body camera. The seal was unmistakable. Collins' posture shifted immediately. His shoulders lowered. His stance widened less aggressively. He took half a step back. There was a pause in the room. No one spoke. "Why didn't you say that earlier?" Collins asked. Carter answered without hesitation. "Because I shouldn't have to." The exchange ended there. No apology was issued in that moment. No acknowledgement of improper conduct. No explanation for why she had been singled out. What unfolded inside that restaurant was not ambiguous. A black woman seated quietly was ordered to leave without legal cause. She was threatened with detention. She was pressed for identification absent any stated offense. The escalation occurred before any verification of wrongdoing. The intervention from other diners came only after it became clear she was being treated differently. The shift in the officer's demeanor occurred only after federal credentials were presented. Until that badge appeared, the assumption had been clear. Her presence was treated as justification for suspicion. Her refusal to comply immediately was framed as defiance. Her request for legal grounds was met with threat. No one else in that dining room was asked to prove they belonged. No one else was warned of detention. The sequence of actions was straightforward. The targeting was visible. The differential treatment was observable. And it was all recorded. The turning point came not when the badge was shown, but in the seconds before it, when the room understood what was happening and said it out loud. Officer Collins did not step back after demanding identification. He did not clarify a statute. He did not cite trespass law. Instead, he shifted tone and escalated. "You're refusing a lawful order," he said. "I ask what law I'm breaking." Agent Carter replied, "You're being disruptive." There had been no raised voice from her, no profanity, no physical movement beyond reaching for her wallet. A man to tables away stood up. "Disruptive? She's been sitting here the whole time." Collins ignored him. A woman near the entrance said clearly, "You walked past everyone else and came straight to her." The statement hung in the air. Collins turned toward the crowd briefly. "I'm handling it," handling what was still undefined. Carter's driver's license was still in his hand. He had not returned it. He had not explained why it was insufficient. He had not indicated that management had formally trespassed her in his presence. Instead, he said, "Stand up." Now, she stood. "Turn around." "For what?" she asked. "For my safety." There had been no threatening movement, no refusal to comply physically, no resistance. A witness spoke louder this time. "This is because she's black." The words were direct. No one contradicted them. Another diner added, "You didn't ask anyone else for ID." Collins' jaw tightened. Everyone needs to calm down, but he did not calm the situation. He increased pressure. He moved behind her. One hand hovered near his cuffs. "You're escalating this for no reason," Carter said evenly. "You made it escalate," Collins replied. That sentence captured the pattern that had followed him for years, shifting blame onto the person being targeted. A man near the bar said, "This is what he does." Several heads turned. The man continued, louder now. "He stopped my nephew twice for nothing. Always looking for crime where there isn't any." Collins faced him briefly. "You want to join her?" The room reacted audibly. A woman near the window said, "We've seen this before. Same officer, same story. There had been prior complaints, 9 in 5 years. 3 alleging racial bias, all dismissed internally, all classified as not sustained. The public record showed a consistent pattern, stops initiated without clear cause, escalation over minor questions, disproportionate focus on black residents." That pattern was now unfolding again, in real time. "You're detaining her for eating," someone said. Collins responded, "She's being non-compliant. Non-compliant for asking legal grounds. Non-compliant for requesting clarification. Non-compliant for existing in a space without immediate submission." Carter's hands remained visible. "Am I under arrest?" "You're close," Collins said. The phrase was not procedural. It was intimidation. Another voice cut through. "This is harassment." Collins did not acknowledge it. Instead, he tightened his posture and said, "Place your hands behind your back." Gasps were audible. "For what charge?" Carter asked. Failure to comply. The charge had not existed until she questioned him. A witness said clearly, "You're creating the crime." That was the moment the injustice became undeniable. It was no longer subtle. It was no longer implied. It was verbalized by multiple independent observers. "You're treating her like a suspect because she's black," the same woman near the entrance said. Collins responded sharply, "That's not what this is." But he did not articulate what it was. He did not cite probable cause. He did not describe a reported offense. He did not document any behavior consistent with disorderly conduct or trespass. He continued to assert authority without legal grounding. The tension in the room was not based on misunderstanding. It was based on observable conduct. One diner spoke again, firm and clear. "Every time there's something suspicious, it's someone black sitting quietly." Collins stepped closer to Carter. Last chance. There was no equal treatment in that space. No parallel scrutiny of other patrons. No balanced enforcement. The focus remained singular and aggressive. Carter did not raise her voice. She did not resist. She did not insult him. "I'm asking for the legal basis of this detention," she said. "You don't get to question me," Collins replied. That statement reflected the core issue, an expectation of unquestioned authority directed at a black woman who had done nothing illegal. Witnesses were no longer whispering. "This is racial profiling," someone said. "You're targeting her. You're looking for a reason to arrest her." The accusations were not abstract. They were reactions to visible conduct. Collins ignored them all. His hand moved again toward his cuffs. "Hands behind your back," he repeated. The room had seen enough. Phones were recording openly now. The narrative was forming in real time. An officer with a documented pattern of complaints involving black residents had once again initiated contact without stated cause, escalated without evidence of crime, and attempted to manufacture noncompliance out of basic legal questioning. That was the moment when it became undeniable. Not because of outrage, not because of rhetoric, because of sequence, because of conduct, because of what everyone in that restaurant could see. And because the only variable distinguishing her from every other diner was her race. The shift did not happen in the restaurant. It happened the next morning inside a municipal conference room at Oak Ridge Police Department headquarters. The bodycam footage had already circulated internally. By sunrise, it was also circulating publicly. Chief Alan Mercer sat at the head of a rectangular table. The department's legal advisor was to his right, internal affairs to his left. A printed transcript of the encounter lay open in front of him. They watched the footage in full. Officer Collins entering the restaurant. Collins walking past multiple white diners without engagement. Collins approaching Special Agent Danielle Carter directly. No complaint cited on camera. No explanation of probable cause. Repeated demands for identification. Escalation without statutory grounding. Witnesses stating clearly, "This is because she's black." The chief paused the video. "Where is the articulated charge?" he asked. There was silence. Internal Affairs responded carefully. He referenced noncompliance. "With what lawful command?" Mercer asked. The legal advisor spoke next. "There is no documented trespass request from management in the footage. There is no indication of disorderly conduct." They resumed playback. Collins saying, "You don't belong here." The room remained quiet. The legal advisor leaned forward. That language creates exposure. Exposure was no longer theoretical. It was immediate. The footage showed selective enforcement. It showed escalation without cause. It showed a pattern consistent with prior complaints that had been dismissed. Internal Affairs pulled Collins' file. 9 complaints in 5 years. 3 alleging racial bias. The prior use of force reviews. All cleared. The chief flipped through the record. Why was retraining not mandated? He asked. No one had an answer beyond procedural closure. The legal advisor spoke bluntly. We are looking at potential civil rights litigation under federal statute. Qualified immunity will not shield conduct that appears discriminatory and unsupported by probable cause. The risk was not contained to Collins. It extended to the department. Vicarious liability, failure to supervise, failure to correct pattern behavior. The footage replayed the moment witnesses said, "You're treating her like a suspect because she's black." The chief stopped it again. That statement is now evidence, he said, because it was not coming from the protagonist. It was coming from neutral observers. Meanwhile, across town, the FBI field office had already conducted its own review. Special Agent in charge Maria Delgado watched the same footage. With federal counsel present, was she on duty? Counsel asked. No, Delgado said. Does that matter? It shouldn't, because constitutional protections do not depend on employment status. Delgado's focus was jurisdictional. A local officer had attempted to detain a federal agent without probable cause. That created federal implications beyond embarrassment. Have we confirmed badge authentication? Counsel asked. Yes, Delgado replied. Credentials verified. There's no dispute. The review expanded. Dispatch logs were requested. Radio traffic examined. There was no recorded call describing criminal conduct. Only a vague customer concern about what was never specified. Back at the police department, the chief addressed Collins directly. You walked past other patrons, Mercer said. They weren't the issue, Collins replied. What was the issue? The chief asked. She refused to comply. With what law? Collins did not answer clearly. Internal Affairs interjected. Witnesses state she was singled out because she's black. That's not why, Collins said. But the footage showed no alternative basis. The chief leaned back. Intent is not the only standard. Impact matters. And the impact is clear. By midday, the city attorney had joined the meeting. If this proceeds to litigation, the attorney said, we face substantial exposure. The pattern in his file weakens our defense. Prior complaints will be discoverable. Discoverable meant public. Public meant reputational damage. The department's risk management officer summarized it directly. The appearance of racial profiling combined with documented prior allegations creates systemic liability. The room understood the implication. This was no longer about one interaction. It was about pattern tolerance. It was about institutional protection. The FBI formally requested preservation of all related evidence. That request alone signaled seriousness. Assistant Special Agent Delgado made one statement during a joint call with city leadership. A federal agent was treated as presumptively criminal for sitting in a restaurant. That treatment mirrors what black citizens report experiencing routinely. The comment was not rhetorical. It was factual. The footage showed escalation without cause. The files showed prior warnings without consequence. The witnesses showed community awareness of a pattern. The chief issued immediate administrative leave for Collins' pending investigation. Badge surrendered, service weapon secured, access credentials suspended. The action was urgent, but it was reactive. Internal Affairs opened a formal misconduct investigation citing potential violations of bias-free policing policy, improper detention procedure, failure to articulate probable cause, conduct unbecoming an officer. The review also examined supervisory oversight. Why had 9 complaints resulted in no formal discipline? Why had 3 racial bias allegations been closed without retraining? The institutional turning point was not emotional. It was structural. Evidence was undeniable. Pattern was documented. Witness testimony aligned with video. The attempt to dismiss prior complaints as isolated no longer held, because this time, the target had federal credentials, and the exposure extended beyond local politics. It was no longer possible to ignore what the public had said inside that restaurant. She's being treated like this because she's black. Now the liability was shared, and the correction would not be optional. Within weeks of the incident, a federal civil rights lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas. Special Agent Danielle Carter did not file it as an FBI representative. She filed it as a private citizen. The complaint alleged unlawful detention, racial profiling, violation of 4th and 14th Amendment protections, and municipal liability for failure to correct a documented pattern of discriminatory conduct. Her attorney stated plainly during a press conference, "This case is not about status. It is about a black woman being treated as presumptively criminal for sitting in a restaurant." The video was entered into evidence, so were Officer Collins' prior complaints, non-citizen complaints, 3 alleging racial bias, to use of force incidents, 0 formal discipline. During discovery, internal emails surfaced. One supervisor had written, 2 years earlier, "We need to watch the optics on his stops." No corrective action followed. Another internal memo acknowledged community perception issues related to Collins' interactions with black residents. No retraining was mandated. No probation imposed. At a pretrial hearing, the city's legal counsel attempted to argue that the officer was responding to a citizen concern. The federal judge interrupted. What specific criminal conduct was reported? The judge asked. There was no clear answer. The transcript from the restaurant footage was read aloud in court. "You don't belong here. If you don't comply, you will be detained." Witness statements were attached. Multiple patrons independently described the encounter as racially motivated. One affidavit read, "He ignored everyone else and targeted her immediately." Another stated, "We've seen this officer treat black people like suspects before." The pattern was no longer anecdotal. It was documented. Settlement negotiations began before trial. The city's risk assessment report estimated potential exposure exceeding $5 million if the case proceeded before a jury. The body cam footage was clear. The witness testimony was consistent. The prior complaints were admissible. The city council convened an executive session. The city attorney stated bluntly, the appearance of racial profiling, combined with prior uncorrected complaints, creates substantial liability. A settlement agreement was reached. Total amount, $3 million. The breakdown was disclosed publicly, $1.4 million in compensatory damages for constitutional violations and emotional distress, $900,000 allocated for punitive damages tied to reckless disregard of civil rights, $500,000 designated for legal fees and court costs, $200,000 set aside for mandatory departmental reform implementation, and independent compliance monitoring. At the announcement, a reporter asked Agent Carter, "Does the amount reflect justice?" She responded evenly, "No amount changes what happened, but accountability matters." Officer Collins was terminated prior to final settlement approval. His separation letter cited violations of bias-free policing policy, improper detention procedure, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His state law enforcement certification was reviewed by the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. Following an administrative hearing, it was suspended pending further disciplinary review. The Brady list, the registry identifying officers with credibility concerns, was updated to include his name. A senior official in the district attorney's office stated privately, "We cannot rely on testimony from an officer whose record now includes substantiated bias findings." His career in law enforcement effectively ended, but the consequences did not stop with him. An independent oversight firm conducted a 90-day audit of the Oak Ridge Police Department. The findings were direct: disproportionate stops of black residents compared to demographic representation, inadequate documentation of probable cause and pedestrian encounters, complaint investigations lacking external review, a pattern of minimizing racial bias allegations through internal classification. As not sustained, the report concluded the department failed to adequately address repeated community concerns regarding racially disparate treatment. During a public council meeting, a resident spoke at the podium. "You ignored us when we said this was happening. It took a federal agent to make you listen." The mayor did not dispute it. Mandatory reforms were adopted. All officers required to undergo bias recognition and constitutional policing retraining. Body cam activation policies strengthened. Supervisory review of stop and identify encounters expanded. An independent civilian review board established with subpoena authority. Quarterly public reporting on demographic data for stops and detentions mandated. The chief addressed the press. "We failed to intervene earlier." The statement was direct. It acknowledged institutional responsibility throughout the proceedings. One fact remained unchanged: the conduct inside that restaurant was not triggered by criminal behavior. It was triggered by assumption. Agent Carter was approached, questioned, threatened, and nearly detained because an officer perceived her presence as suspect. Witnesses said it in real time. She's being treated like this because she's black. The lawsuit confirmed it legally. The audit confirmed it structurally. The settlement quantified it financially. $3 million reflected more than a single interaction. It reflected years of ignored warning signs and dismissed complaints. The financial consequence was significant. The reputational damage was lasting. The institutional reforms were overdue. And the message was clear. Constitutional rights do not depend on race, occupation, or whether someone carries a badge in their wallet. When those rights are violated, accountability follows. This time, it came with a documented record, a public judgment, and a price tag. This story is meant to generate awareness. It proves that constitutional rights are only as strong as the willingness to enforce them equally, and that unchecked bias, when protected by institutions, becomes a systemic failure. In 2025, Black Americans were nearly 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white Americans, and 77% of Black adults say they are treated less fairly by police than white people. Ask yourself, how many encounters never go viral? How many people are detained, searched, or humiliated without ever having a badge to reveal? Would accountability have happened here if cameras weren't rolling? This case forced consequences because the evidence was undeniable, but justice should not depend on status, occupation, or federal credentials. It should apply equally before harm happens. Do you know any organizations that work to protect the rights of Black people in America? Legal support groups, community safety initiatives, civil rights coalitions? Share them in the comments. Let's support those working for justice and safety for all. Leave your thoughts below. Reflect on what you've seen. These conversations matter. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.